My question sort of dovetails on that a little bit, but as you guys probably all know, in March, the Annals of Internal Medicine did a review of the published research on saturated fat and heart disease link, and crazy stuff, but they said they couldn't find a link, and of course the New York Times actually picked it up. And I was curious if you thought this was sort of a tipping point, because, I mean, are we at the tipping point with the whole saturated fat thing, and is that going to really help the movement? And if it does, are we ready for that? I know you guys have been sort of talking about where the movement's going, but I'd almost like you to expound upon, I mean, are we going then to gut health? Are we going to, just talk about that a little bit, I guess, where we're going. Are we ready to not be the David and Goliath story? Are we ready to really take on the mainstream?
That's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell, too.
Yes,
and
Tipping
David
Point.
Always
That's what I was
wins.
referring to. Yes.
David and Goliath, that's his new book.
Oh, I didn't read that one.
Yeah,
So.
it's really good. And David Always Wins is the interesting takeaway from that. So to me, this is just going to be like the ocean. A wave will crash in, it'll go back out. So right on the heels of the saturated fat does not cause cardiovascular disease, 4 days later, saturated fat does cause breast cancer. So, I mean, it's like, yeah. So that's not going away anytime soon, particularly with the, if we were to do away with all these epidemiological studies, then we would have biostatisticians rioting in the streets and turning over cars. And so we have to fund all that stuff to keep these researchers in a nice, safe, it's basically a social welfare program, keeping these people safe and secure and out of harm on the streets, and they would be wreaking havoc. And so we're doing a public good by funding all that stuff in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, and over time, I think we are gradually seeing a lot of these things are falling. A lot of these old precepts and tenets of the dogmatic AMA, American Cancer Society, and all of the things that they've been spouting for decades, they start to fall a little bit. And the saturated fat thing, now there's a lot more interest in, well, fats maybe aren't that bad for you. And when the likes of Oz, the great and powerful Dr. Oz, when he, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, when he when he shifts, albeit pretty late in the game, that's an indication that maybe some things are starting to go our way. So I do think we're trending definitely in the right. I haven't seen any setbacks, really. Name me a setback that we've had truly in the science world since we started really digging into this in the last decade. We've been making progress, and really for me, it's just about bringing new people in to play with us and hang out and check out what we're doing and find out that it's not just good for you, but it happens to taste great and it feels good and to live longer and you don't get sick as often. And what's wrong with that? Yeah.
I think maybe the only way that we could lose something like that is if we become so dogmatic on a topic. Like both Mark and I come from definitely a camp that likes low-carb diets. Like I've seen so much efficacy with that, so much success, but we've had the conversation where we're like, okay, maybe that broad recommendation isn't as solid as what we once thought it is, or maybe there's more specific situations where that is appropriate and other things are more appropriate. And so it's just being willing to use this big picture template as a starting point, but then being really willing to burn anything down that needs to be burned down and start over. Like I've been very much in the high dose fish oil camp, and then a lot of like Matt Lalonde, Chris Kresser, Chris Masterjohn had some ass chewings with me about it, and I was like, okay, I'm wrong, or like I feel like I'm wrong on this, and I need to modify where I'm at. So being willing to own up for like, okay, this was the best information I had. I went with it, doing the best I can. And now we have some updated data, and then we can move forward. But like you mentioned, the gut biome, man, that interestingly, that is going to be in some ways kind of the skinny end of the wedge to really get this mega mainstream. I think in 2003, 2004, if you put intestinal permeability into PubMed, there were about 200 search returns, and they were mainly talking about quackery and pseudoscience. And now when you put intestinal into PubMed, the very first suggestion is intestinal permeability, and there's over 11,000 citations, and it's growing like crazy. There's 2,500 more citations this year than there were last year. And so this is the hottest area of epidemiological research, And like Mark kicked this whole thing off with, like, I think that's like the gut bugs are going to be where 90% of the story plays out. And that's something that we get to own, like the Human Gut Project and everything that we talk about, paleo and primal and all the rest of it. That's really what we get to own, because it talks about unprocessed foods and animal products and plant products and cyclic nature and photoperiod. And, you know, I mean, it ties all this stuff together.